Hey everybody, in today's video what I'm going to try to do is create a chart that looks like the Yahoo Finance chart for a ticker. So in this case, I'm looking at Apple's stock chart. So you see the price change over the past year. We also see the volume changes as well. So what I'm going to try to do is get my chart to look as similar to this as possible, including even having these labels as well, where you've got February, you've got the 14 indicating the middle of the month. So I'm going to try and replicate all this as much as I can. So I'm going to use this as sort of a template. And so let's see how closely we can create this chart. And so for starters, I've downloaded Apple's data from Yahoo Finance. So back on that ticker page, I just went to the historical data and downloaded all this stuff. Now, I don't need things like the open, high, or the low. I also don't need the adjusted close. All I'm really interested in the closing value and the volume. And I'm just going to format this in a comma so it's easier to see that volume. So for starters, I could just go to insert chart and see exactly what this gets me at right away. Now, if I just stick with the basic line chart, that is nowhere near what I want to get to just yet. And so a couple of things off the bat is that we're going to need to set up a separate axis because right now the volume is a lot larger than the closing price. That's why the closing price looks like a straight line, because it's minimal compared to the volume. And another thing to consider is on the Yahoo Finance chart, any positive days, the volume was green. Any negative days where the stock was down, the volume showed up as red. So I want to capture that as well. So what I'm going to do is create some extra columns, one for a positive change and one for a negative one. And to start with, for the first one, I'm going to set it to the volume because there's no prior data that I can compare against to see whether this was a positive or negative day. And so I'm going to divide this by 1,000 for the volume just to make it a smaller number and a bit easier to read. And now for the next one and for all the other rows, I'm going to set up a formula. Say, okay, if the closing price of this day was greater than or equal to the previous day, then I'm going to take this volume divided by 1,000. Otherwise, it's going to be blank. And for the negative, I'm going to do a similar formula, except this time say if this value is less than the previous day, then I'm going to take the volume divided by 1,000. Otherwise, it's blank. So only one of these two columns should have a value for each one of these dates. And so here we can see that it looks to be nicely filled out. So we've got that volume data in there. Again, I'm going to apply the formatting just so it's a bit cleaner. And now in my chart, now I can right click, select the data and update the series and all that. But Excel actually makes it really easy to just extend this data set. So all I need to do is drag this across. And you can see now it's picked up those extra series. So what I'm going to do now is right click, select data, because I don't want to include everything. I don't want to include the actual volumes. I'm just interested in the closing amount plus the positive or negative values. Okay. So now my chart looks really messy right now. Not what I want at all. If I go to right click, change chart type, what I'm going to do is select a combo chart. And in this case, for the closing price, I want that line chart. And for the positive and negative values, I want a stacked column, not just a regular column chart. I want a stacked one, because the beauty of a stacked one is I'm only either going to have a positive or negative value. I'm not ever actually going to have both of them. So there's no danger that these are going to stack on top of each other. But by using a stack chart, they're occupying the same space. If you have two column charts, one's going to be on the left, one's going to be on the right. And so not going to be nicely and neatly in the middle. And so that's why I want to use a stacked column chart. Another thing I need to do is tick off the secondary axis. And that ensures that now it's no longer on that one axis. That's kind of skewing the price and the closing price, making it look very small. So now this is starting to look a little bit better. However, there's one glaring problem. Like if I look at this line chart right here, right, it doesn't look like it's moved a lot. If I go back to the chart, there's a significant dip down here. And part of the reason that this is more illustrated on this chart is because if you notice the range, it goes to a high of 180 and a low of 130. On my chart, Excel defaults to a low of 0. It's not what I want. So I'm going to select this axis, right click, format axis, and adjust my minimum to 130, and then make my maximum, let's say, actually 190 looks to be okay. So now we do see that significant drop in price. So now it does start to look a lot more similar to that chart in Yahoo Finance. However, there's still another problem here. These column charts for the volumes are going a lot higher than the line chart. And that's not the kind of look we have here where the volumes are a bit lower. So there's a couple things you could do here. I mean, one is you could create a separate chart, put it underneath, but that's not ideal to do because then you always have to line it up and make sure it looks the same. So there's another thing we can do. And that again goes back to fixing this axis. So if I want these values to, to adjust these column charts so they're much smaller, I need to adjust the scale. So I'm going to format axis again. And so I've got that minimum again at 0, and I've got a maximum of about 200,000 here. So what I could do is change this maximum, let's say to 900,000. Now all of a sudden we start to see that impact where we're crushing these values a little lower. Now maybe it makes sense to set this to a maximum of 800 just so they pop up a little bit more, and maybe set the minimum at 200,000. Maybe that's not enough. Perhaps that was too small. So it's a bit of a trial and error in getting the exact sort of look that you want here, because it's really going to depend on your data. So this is where you may need to play around with it a little bit. So I'm going to go with 600,000 maybe. So they start to pop up a little bit more. So if I compare the Yahoo Finance chart, we can see that this high amount almost touched this bottom end. And that's kind of where we are there. Perhaps it should be a bit lower. So let's say I'll adjust this to 700,000 so it's a bit lower. Let's say maybe 800,000. There we go. So we've got a similar sort of effect there, where we've got those volumes showing at the bottom. So now I've stretched my chart a bit too wide here. And so I'm just going to adjust this out so it looks a bit more scaled. So that looks a bit more similar. Now another challenge here is you'll notice that there's some gaps in these dates. And this goes back to using the date field here as my x-axis. And so if I right click format axis, I can set this to a text axis as opposed to right now it's detecting a date axis. And by doing so, it's going to get rid of those gaps. Now, but the problem is now I've got a really ugly axis here with dates going vertically, and that doesn't look real nice. So I'll address that in a second. But the next thing I'm going to do is fix these colors, because right now these colors are, yellow. They're not looking exactly how they should. So I am going to, instead of trying to eyeball these colors and try to manually just try to change them, what I've done is I've actually used a color picker tool from a photo editing program, GIMP, just to exactly get the color values, the hex values of these colors. So for the blue color, I'm going to select solid line, but for the color, I'm going to select more colors. And here we've got this hex value. So if you use the color picker, you can get that exact value of that color, which this is what it comes out to be. So it's much lighter. Hit OK. And so now if you look back, if I compare, that looks pretty similar. The only difference is maybe my line is a bit fatter, a bit heavier, right? So again, I can format this data series one more time. And this time under the weight, what I can do is, actually the width, I can change this maybe to about, let's say, 1.5 maybe, 1.25. Right, so it gets a bit more comparable. That looks pretty close, I would say, to what Yahoo Finance has. So the next thing I'm going to do is format these column charts. And so if you're not sure what series you're on, you can click on this series. And so you can see I've selected the negative one. So this one, obviously, I want to make it red. And I'm going to go to more colors again. And the code for this one, based on my color picker, is FF7F83. Looks like a light red, which is probably about right. I can swap over to the other series, select positive. Again, let's do a solid one. And under more colors, this one came in, was a green, 56CB96. Okay, and there we go. And so now we've got something that looks a bit closer to that. I'd say that's pretty darn close. Maybe the red. Now the red may not look exactly like the one on Yahoo Finance, and this could come down to the Windows theme just being a slightly different look. So in some cases, it may take a bit more tweaking to figure out exactly why that is, because obviously that negative color, maybe those changes didn't take. So let me just try this one more time. So red FF7F83. Hit OK. There we go. Maybe that's a bit better there. So now if I go back in here, that looks pretty close. And so I'd say that's starting to look a whole lot more like that Yahoo Finance chart that we've got there. And the main thing at this point I would say is, one, getting rid of this axis, because we don't have an axis for the volumes, just because the volumes are never going to get up to this high because we've purposely scaled them low. So I it doesn't give me an option to remove the axis, but what I can do is make it invisible. So I'm just going to use a white color here. And now that axis is effectively gone. The next thing that I'm going to do is fix that x-axis. So right now I'm using the dates, but I'm going to create another field for the x-axis. Now if I go back to the Yahoo Finance chart, we start with the year, then we've got a 14 to indicate the middle of the month, then we've got the next month 14, and so on and so forth. So I can just cheat and really follow that same sort of format. I can create my own labels that I want. So for instance, the x-axis for the first value, I'll put a 22. Midway, I'll put a 14. When I get to February, I'll type in Feb. So you could create a formula for this where you do an if function to say, okay, if it's the first day of the month, take the abbreviation. If it's, greater than or less than or right around the 14th day, then put in the number 14. So you could do that, but for the sake of just trying to show you that we can do this quickly, I'm just going to quickly, just plot these values in as opposed to trying to come up with a formula and then going through and explaining it, which could be a bit complicated. So it's probably a bit quicker just to do it this way. So I'm into July almost, so I'm all about there. I just want to show you that basically we can manipulate these labels to whatever we want them to be. So we're not limited to what we've got in our dates. So now, again, I'm going to select this data, and once more, let's extend this outward. And now right-click, select data. And I don't want the x-axis on here. I want to actually edit it so it's here. So my x-axis is in column F. So I'm going to change column A to column F. Column A to column F. Hit OK. And now we can see that we've got that pretty close. Now I don't need this legend. Get rid of that. And so now, so this is what the chart looks like. So we've got those values going down. We've got the volumes going across. If I switch back over to Yahoo Finance, I'd say that looks pretty close. I mean, the green's maybe a touch lighter than what I've got, but other than that, it's I'd say it's pretty close, and it could just come down again, like I said, to the Windows style, maybe to a bit of a slight shading effect, but this is pretty close, I feel, to the same sort of layout Yahoo Finance has. So I just wanted to do this exercise just to show you how we can recreate that sort of Yahoo Finance chart in Excel. So let me know your thoughts, how close I came or how you thought I did. And I hope you found this video useful, and thanks for watching.